IO9 presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here are your hosts, John Joseph Adams and David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 44 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hi, I'm John Joseph Adams. I'm the editor of Lightspeed and Fantasy Magazine, and I've also edited several anthologies, such as Armored, an anthology about powered armor and mecha, which is coming out from Baen Books in April next year, and Under the Moons of Mars, New Adventures on Barsoom, an anthology detailing the further adventures of John Carter of Mars, which comes out from Simon & Schuster in February.
And I'm David Barr Kirtley. I'm the author of many short stories, including The Ontological Factor, about a nervous philosophy student who finds himself in a house full of doorways to other worlds. The story is out now, in the September-October issue of Cicada magazine. And our guest today is Charlaine Harris. She's the author of the best-selling Southern Vampire Mysteries series, which was adapted by director Alan Ball into the hit HBO series True Blood. She recently edited the Sookie Stackhouse Companion, as well as the short story anthologies Death's Excellent Vacation and Home Improvement Undead Edition.
Okay, so let's get to our interview.
All right, so we're here with Charlaine Harris. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
So to start with, could you just tell us, how did you first come up with the idea of vampires drinking synthetic blood?
Well, I started off, my initial thought on the series was I wanted to write about a woman dating a vampire. But to make them less frightening, to give them a reason for being out, I had to develop a theory that would let them look less vicious. So they would have to have another food source. So I read some articles about synthetic blood, which never has really worked out before now, though people have made the attempt. And it seemed to me like a viable synthetic blood would be the perfect answer to my problems. Vampires could say, oh no, we're not dangerous. We drink synthetic blood. We don't want to grab you and bite you. And people could believe that because people are gullible.
Okay, so like every vampire series has slightly different rules when it comes to how the vampires work. So for your series, how did you come up with the rules? And is that something that you worked out in detail to start with, or did the rules just sort of evolve naturally as the story took shape?
I started out knowing a few things. First, they wouldn't be able to go out in daylight. I think, even though, in the books, Dracula is a daywalker, but I had to have some system of checks and balances, I figured, because otherwise vampires are so powerful that there really wouldn't be any point in humans trying to outwit them or stand up to them. There were some things I just decided not to tackle. For some reason, and I can't quite understand why, readers are secretly fascinated with the physical output of vampires. They are always trying to think of a nice way of saying, do your vampires poop? Or do your vampires ejaculate? And I'm just going, this is just, vampire bathroom habits are just not interesting to me.
Okay, so the Sookie Stackhouse series seems equally likely to appeal to fans of horror, mystery, and romance. Was that by design?
Absolutely. I don't really plan my career out in any detail, which is one reason my success was so late in life. But I did hope that if I adopted a kitchen sink approach, which was something I had always wanted to do, it wasn't calculated, that it would appeal to mystery readers, romance readers, horror readers, and hopefully science fiction readers too.
So you said you're reaching the end of the Sookie Stackhouse series. Do you have any thoughts about what works and what doesn't when it comes to wrapping up a long-running series?
I have a lot of thoughts. I haven't ever wrapped up a series that ran this long. The previous series I have not, I don't think they've exceeded 7 or 8 books. So this is a new experience for me. I've lived with Sookie for a long, long time. By the time the last book is published, which will be in 2013, and it'll be the 13th book, I will have been with Sookie for 15 years, almost the entire growing up period of my daughter, actually. So it's going to be kind of a jolt not to have her here anymore, living in the house with me. But at the same time, I find that facing the end of the series is giving me the most tremendous shot in the arm.
I mean, could you give examples maybe of other series that you think have ended well or ended poorly, and sort of what made them good or bad?
Well, of course, I thought the ending of 6 Feet Under was brilliant. And I am one of the few people I know who thought Lost was great. I thought the ending was fantastic. For book series, I'm not completely sure that I've known other people who've wrapped up long-running series and I've lasted through to the last book. So all I can say is thanks to my readers who have, and I've always known how the series would end, and that's how it's going to end. I know I can't make everybody happy. That's why I'm going to go on vacation when the last book comes out.
I mean, could you say, what did you like about the finales of 6 Feet Under and Lost?
Well, I thought the 6 Feet Under finale was unexpected and poignant. Alan went to all the characters at their moment of death, and since death was the theme of the show, that seemed weirdly appropriate and something I would never have thought of, and I always admire that. The ending of Lost was mystical, and a lot of people thought it was a cheat, but I didn't. It felt satisfying to me. And it had sort of a 6 Feet Under-ish vibe to it too, and kind of a Titanic vibe. When all the Titanic people who died are waiting at the end for Rose to come. The ending of Lost was somewhat reminiscent of that too. So I guess it seems I like a lot of death at the end.
So, the TV show True Blood kicked off with this really interesting viral marketing campaign that made it seem as if synthetic blood was an actual product and as if vampires were really making their existence known. Were you aware that was going on? And if so, what did you think about it?
I think HBO has a wonderful marketing department. They seem to have hit a vein. They seem to have hit a real vein with people. Their marketing is very successful, very attractive, and very exciting. As far as getting advance warning, no, why would they? I've done my part, really.
Okay, so and True Blood, the TV series, diverges significantly from your books to the extent that you've said that you often don't know what's going to happen next on the show. What have been some of the biggest surprises for you while you watched it?
Well, there have been many surprises, almost too many to name. I think knowing that Jason in the books is very much like Jason on the show, but you don't see it in the books. And that was a tremendous, startling moment to me. And I thought, ooh, because Jason in the books is a stupid horn dog, and he is in the show too. He's a little sweeter in the show than he is in the books. Jessica was a complete surprise to me, but I think a brilliant one. She's not in the books, and I think she's a great addition to the show. Those are the two most startling. I think, of course, Lafayette lived, and I kind of expected that. Nelson Ellis saved his own life by being so brilliant in the show. And in the books, of course, he wasn't that great or as charming as Nelson, and he died.
So you said that Anne Rice is one of your favorite authors. Could you tell us about why you enjoy her writing and what sort of influence she's had on you?
Sure. I'm not such a great fan of the witch books, but her vampire books I just loved. I loved Interview with a Vampire at the time it was published was one of the most startling, innovative books on the market. And it held that pride of place for many years. I just can't tell you how impressed I was with the originality of her thinking. I still think that book was just a masterstroke. And I think so many of her ideas are classics. She's had as much influence on the vampire genre as Dracula did.
Was there anything in particular that she did that you wanted to emulate, and anything that you wanted to do differently?
Well, I can't write like her. There's no point in me trying. I've got a different agenda than Anne Rice has had. So I don't try to emulate her, except I hope in my goal of producing the best book I can possibly produce. So there are great differences, and the background of Anne's vampires, since they can't are not interested in having sex, there's a tremendous homoerotic vibration going on in the background of all the books. And in my books, vampires can have sex and are, very enthusiastic about that with whomever they feel like having it. So mine is a more overt, maybe an obvious sexuality than that in Anne's books.
So the Twilight series has been a big hit in recent years, particularly among teenage girls. What's been your take on the whole Twilight phenomenon?
I think that Stephenie Meyer hit the nerve she was trying for. Honestly, I think it was like a shot in the dark that paid off big for her. And I'm really glad for anybody who can make money in today's market. She opened the door for a lot of people. Because of her, a lot of young people are growing up reading vampire that might not necessarily have enjoyed the genre otherwise. And I also think her readers grow up to read my books. I've read her books. She says she does not read other vampire writers ever. So, I don't know her, and that's, probably all I can say about the Twilight books.
Did you grow up reading vampire stories yourself, or is that something you got interested in later?
I grew up reading anything I could get my hands on. I've always been a voracious reader and remain so to this day. I read mysteries, I read classics, I read Dracula, I read anything and everything. And I think that was a wonderful, wonderful freedom my parents gave me.
Were there any particular books that really inspired you when you were younger?
There were. And since I've been thinking about this a lot lately, I can actually remember the names of some of them. I think Jane Eyre was the basic book for the whole romance field. If you look at the elements in Jane Eyre, they've been repeated over and over and over. The unconventional heroine who looks conventional on the outside, the brooding hero, the mad wife, the big block to their happiness ever after, which gets removed. And then the Three Musketeers, which is like the seminal buddy movie, but written. And believe me, the Three Musketeers, the original novel, is not anything like the children's version or like the movie version. It's a very bawdy book with a lot of very unconventional relationships in it. Those were two that were really, really important to me. And I'm sure there were many others. I read a lot of Ray Bradbury, H.P. Lovecraft, on and on and on.
Okay, and so according to your website, you're a science fiction fan. Who are some of your favorite authors these days, in science fiction specifically, as opposed to fantasy and horror?
Connie Willis is one of my huge favorites. Julie Trinita, I think, is very, very good. Mike Carey is so good. Oh my gosh, there are just so many. I just read a wonderful book called Ready Player One by Ernest Cline that I thought just blew my socks off. I was lucky enough to read it a few months ago in manuscript form, and it's really totally gratifying to see it getting big publicity now.
Okay, so, your Harper Connolly series features a main character who develops supernatural powers after being struck by lightning. How did you get that idea, and what sort of research did you do on the effects of being struck by lightning?
I did research lightning, even though to me it's still pretty much magic, though I've read the scientific explanation many times. And luckily for me, there is a group for lightning strike survivors. They were kind enough to let me listen in for a while, which I appreciated very much. It's a select group of people who keep having physical problems for many, many years after the original incident. It was just fascinating and touching to read the difficulties they have with the medical establishment in getting treatment for these various problems they develop.
So your bibliography lists a piece you wrote called An Evening with Al Gore. Can you tell us what that's about?
Oh, that's my ecological horror story. I just loved that story. It was really very different for me. But it's about some supernatural creatures who are really struck by Al Gore's arguments in favor of recycling and turning the world around, and they carry it to a very extreme degree.
So in addition to writing, you've also edited a number of anthologies. How did you get involved with that, and what sort of books have you worked on before?
Well, I was approached by Marty Greenberg, God bless his memory, and Marty was interested in producing an anthology that I would edit. I didn't feel qualified to take that on by myself, but my dear and close friend Tony Kellner is a fantastic editor. And so I told Marty, and this was several years ago, that I would be glad to undertake it if Tony could be my partner. And he readily agreed. So Tony and I are about to do our 5th anthology together. And that has been a great learning experience for me. I get to read other writers and figure out what makes their stories work or not. And then I have to be really, really tactful when I ask them to make changes. So it's been very good for me all the way around.
I saw your most recent one that came out was a sort of supernatural home improvement kind of book. Where did that idea come from?
Well, we sat down to brainstorm. We did special occasions for the first few, birthdays, the holidays, vacations. So, but then we thought home improvement would be fun. Everybody's got a terrible story about home improvement. They don't usually end as bloodily as the stories in our books. The next one's going to be set in any kind of school or classroom. It's going to be called An Apple for the Creature.
Could you give an example or two of the stories where home improvement goes bloodily wrong?
Oh, sure. Melissa Marr's got a great story in there about a neighborhood a neighborhood watch situation where the person in charge of enforcing the neighborhood rules pushes in once too many. And there's a great haunting story in there, too, where a woman comes back to try to redo the apartment where she actually killed her boyfriend many decades before.
All right. And so, and are there any other recent or upcoming projects that you'd like to mention?
Oh, sure. The Sookie Companion is coming out at the end of this month, next week. And it has been delayed once, so I'm very glad to see it finally appearing on the shelves. It was a huge coordination nightmare because so many people were involved. I wrote an original novella for it, and there's an interview with me, an interview with Alan Ball, there's a timeline, there's a family tree, there's a map, there's a compendium of all the characters that have ever been in any Sookie novel. It was just a massive undertaking, and it got to where I would almost break out in hives when I saw companion in the subject line of an email.
What would have been some of the most interesting comments that people have posted on your board?
Interesting can be interpreted so many different ways. Some people are so invested in Sookie's relationships that they develop a violent partisanship between one suitor and another. And finally, we had to just ban that discussion from the board. People get very, very vehement. One woman said, if Sookie doesn't end up with Eric, I'm going to kill myself. And I said, surely not. Surely you wouldn't. And there have been pretty intense arguments over other aspects of the book. I just never expected all that. Of course, I guess I'm just not used to anybody paying attention to me.
Mm-hmm. I know that Laurel K. Hamilton has had sort of problems with some of her fans. Have you had any problems like that?
Not as probably intense as Laurel's, but yes, I've had a problem or two. Yeah, I had one person who showed up at 4 or 5 of my signings in a row, and they were pretty widely separated geographically, so that was of a little concern to me. I've had people who seem very, very intense about whether or not Sookie would end up with Eric. Very intense about that, to the point where I'm a little concerned about them.
Well, that actually does it for our questions. I don't want to end on that note, though. Let's see. What's something cheerful? Is there anything cheerful you'd like to talk about to wrap things up?
Well, let's see. Tony and mine's new anthology is out. The Companion will be out. I have wrapped up the next Sookie, which will be out next May. It's called Deadlocked. Then I have a short story to write for Joe Lansdale. I have one to write for our anthology. Then I'll start Sookie 13 and finish it. And then I can write whatever I want to write.
Well, sounds great. All right. So, Charlaine Harris, thanks so much for joining us on Geek's Guide to the Galaxy.
Thank you for inviting me.
And that was our interview. So thanks so much to Charlaine Harris for joining us on the show. All right, and so for our discussion today, we're going to be talking about some of the other TV shows that are on right now that are adapted from novel series. We wanted to talk in particular about Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, and Dexter. If you've been listening to our show for a while, you know that we talked about the first couple episodes of Game of Thrones in episode 35, which was our Daniel Abraham interview. And we talked about the first couple episodes of Walking Dead in episode 25, which was our Robert Kirkman episode. But we've now seen all of season 1 of those shows, so we're going to have more of a sort of overall retrospective look at them. And I guess we'll just start out, John, now that we've seen all of season 1 of Game of Thrones, just what did you think of the show overall?
Oh, well, I thought it was pretty great. When we were talking about the first couple episodes, I mentioned how, watching the first couple episodes inspired me to go back and reread the book, which I hadn't done in a while. And it was sort of good preparation for the then forthcoming Dance with Dragons. It was good preparation for that anyway. But having, just reread the book sort of ahead of the show sort of gave me a really fresh perspective to see how well it was being adapted. And really, I thought it really couldn't have been much better. There's a few scenes here and there, I think where they were like additional scenes that I was like, well, I don't know if that was really necessary. And there's at least one that was sort of probably a little problematic. I know a lot of people had problems with it, that it was like sort of overly gratuitous or whatnot. But for the most part, I think everything was adapted quite well. I have a few quibbles with the final episode. Like, I think it's very well done, but it doesn't have quite the power that the ending of the novel does. And the ending of the novel is amazing. It's like, and I'm not going to spoil anything for it, but just when you're reading the book and you get to the last couple chapters and everything that's happening there, it's just like it hits you with such there's like so much emotion, and it's so intense and so cool. It's like brilliant. And then the ending of the show, just like it captures some of that, but it didn't quite capture all of it to me. And maybe it's just a case that I had really high expectations going into it because I knew what was going to happen, and I was really looking forward to seeing how it was rendered on screen. But it didn't quite do it for me. But overall, the first season I thought was very well done.
I actually really liked the finale of the show, and maybe maybe it's a matter of expectations, because I wasn't really looking forward to it. I was really dreading how bad it might be, and so the fact that it was as good as it was, was sort of a thrilling relief for me. Yeah, I guess if you don't want to spoil it, I'll be circumspect, but obviously the thing that had me the most concerned was whether the computer graphics would be good enough to depict what happens, and I was really pretty impressed. Especially on a TV budget with how good they looked. But no, overall, I was really pleased with the show. I actually thought it got better as it went along. I thought that, as it sort of built toward the climax of those last couple episodes, I found myself getting more and more involved. And thinking back to our episode where we discussed the first 2 episodes, a lot of my impressions of the show, I think, have remained amazingly consistent, from what I said then. I said I thought the casting was really good, and I continue to think the casting was really good throughout the whole first season. I thought that the budget wasn't always sufficient to do a real epic fantasy the way I imagined it should, the way I imagined it in my head, and that continued to be the case throughout the first season. I remember saying I thought some of the nudity was kind of tacky in the first episode, and that continued to be the case throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean that's the case of the sort of superfluous scene that I was talking about. It's I think you probably even could guess the one I mean. It's the one
with everyone was calling the sex position scene, the combination of sex and exposition. I guess I wanted to mention, I went and saw, John and I were just at the World Science Fiction Convention in Reno, Nevada, actually where John, just got married. And we found out that George R. R. Martin had his wedding ceremony in the same venue that John did just hours later. So I was saying I think that's really cool. I was saying if I had known about that, I probably would have just hidden a cabinet or something and tried to crash the George R. R. Martin ceremony, which is, I'm sure, why they didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
That's what was going on.
And the good news is everyone survived both weddings.
And also then at Worldcon, George R. R. Martin gave a lecture where he screened the episode of Game of Thrones that he wrote the screenplay for. It's called The Pointy End. It's either, I think it's episode 7 or 8 maybe. And so he showed that episode and then sort of would pause the video every once in a while and just sort of talk about what he had written and what they were able to film and stuff like that. It was really interesting. I mean, I had really not known until I heard him talk about it how restrictive the budget stuff was. He was saying, like he showed that there's a scene where Tyrion is leading the clansmen out of the mountains of the moon, and they show up at the Lannister encampment, the Lannister army's encampment, and they're all just on foot. And, you're like, why aren't these guys on horses? That would be so much better. And George was like, yeah, well, I wrote this scene, they're all on horses, but we'd already blown our horse budget for the whole season. So pretty much every scene in that episode, he's like, just imagine these guys are all on horses. We just couldn't afford horses.
Yeah, I wondered about that too. And I don't know, I don't think it was that episode, but the scene where Tyrion actually goes to fight with the troops when his father orders him to go on the front lines or whatever, and or he's on the flank or something, I can't remember, but anyway, he's ordered to go do that. But then in the TV show, he basically gets knocked out right away, right? And in the book, he actually fights, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, I wondered if that was a budgetary thing too. It's because they couldn't afford to show all of that fighting in close-up detail that they'd have to if Tyrion had actually stayed conscious the whole time. Yeah,
no, I'm sure they couldn't afford it, and I'm sure and they probably didn't have time for it either. Yeah, well, I was disappointed not to see any. I mean, there were no battles at all in the show, right? That I can think of. I mean, I was really disappointed not to see the Battle of the Whispering Wood. That was similarly, they just kind of cut to the aftermath of it. And I'm sure that's that's all budget. George was actually saying that in the episode he wrote, there's this part where Robb calls the band. He decides he's going to go to war against the Lannisters, and he calls his bannermen to come to his aid. And these ravens fly out from Winterfell. And George said in his initial script, the way he wrote it, you would see each of the bannermen. You would see Roose Bolton flaying a guy alive, and then a messenger comes in, and then he, calls his soldiers, and they all go riding out of the castle and stuff. And it would do that for each of the lords. And he's like, even when I wrote it, I knew they probably weren't going to be able to do it. But, so I sent it to the producers, Dave and Dan, and they were like, no, if we were to actually film this, it would be 5 times our budget for the episode, just doing this one montage.
Yeah.
And even there's no Jane Poole character in the TV show. It was a pretty minor character, but, she becomes a little more important in the later books. And so you're kind of like, why is she not in there? How expensive would it be to hire one more teenage girl actress? And the answer, according to George, is too expensive, more expensive than they could afford,
Right.
That gives you a sense of exactly how tight things were.
Yeah, actually, I wondered about Rickon too, which is the youngest Stark child. And it's I honestly, I forgot he was in the show. It wasn't in the first couple episodes. I guess in the first episode he's there briefly. They see him, but they almost never talk about him. And in the books he's much more prominent. I mean, they mention him, much more often. And it wasn't until I actually started rereading the book alongside the series that I was like, oh wait, hey, where's Rickon? He's never around. And that's basically true of the whole series, the whole first season.
Well, and speaking of characters being absent, I mean, a lot of people were complaining that the direwolves are kind of, MIA for a lot of the season. And I guess, they're just George was talking about that too. He was saying that, the dogs they had playing the direwolves are it's this particular breed, Aleutian something or other. But they've been bred specifically for movies to play wolves in movies, just because they kind of look, they've been bred to look more like wolves.
Right.
But they've also been bred to be really, really friendly, because, you obviously don't want dogs that are going to be at all dangerous around the actors, particularly around child actors and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But so then the problem though was that they actually couldn't get the dogs to be aggressive enough when they needed them to. They couldn't get them to growl and snarl and pretend to bite people and stuff. There was a scene actually in that episode where Bran is talking to Osha in the Godswood, and his dog Summer was supposed to be there and supposed to growl at Osha, and they just could not get the dog to growl. And so it would just keep going up to her and licking her hand. And so they finally just had to film it without the dog in the scene at all. It was funny. Wow. Actually, in that same episode, there's a part where the dog bites the fingers off of the great John Umber. And George said, it's a good thing that dog didn't just go up and lick his fingers. That would have really had a big impact on the dramatics of that scene.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, he was saying, that it's not clear what they're going to do for season 2. I mean, presumably they'll have to go to CG direwolves at some point, as they're supposed to get bigger and bigger. But of course, it's really hard to do. I don't know if you saw The Day After Tomorrow. They had CG wolves in that one, and they just looked ridiculous. And he said that fur is one of the hardest things to do with computer graphics. But at least computer graphics wolves, you can get them to bite people, no problem. Actually, speaking of Osha, there's a character Asha in the books, and she's going to be in season 2, but they've changed her name to something else. Because they thought Osha and Asha sounded too similar, and people who watch TV can't keep that stuff straight. That kind of annoys me, honestly. But they did the same thing, with Lysa Arryn's son. He's Robert. He's called Robin in the TV show, which is kind of his nickname, but still, because I think that's one of the clever things about Song of Ice and Fire is that, there's this realization that people, lots of people have the same name in a real world, and it just gives a little bit more sense of reality to it. And then another thing he was saying is that, people, because season 1 sticks very, very close to the book. And people were saying, but he was saying, that probably future seasons are going to start diverging more and more from the books, because, these little, they make little changes, and these little changes, just have big impacts down the line. So, for example, in season 1, there's this scene where Khal Drogo kills one of his blood riders. I think his name is Mago, and this is the guy where he rips his tongue out through his throat. That was actually Jason Momoa's idea to do that. But in the books, that guy doesn't die. He's still around. And George, the way he said it made you think that maybe the guy is going to come back and be sort of a significant character. But obviously, and the fact that they left out Jane Poole, stuff like that down the road could really start cause major divergences. It was interesting just listening to him talk about it, because you can hear how he pronounces the characters' names. So there's the character who in the audiobooks is pronounced Brienne of Tarth. And I absolutely hated that when I first heard it, but now I've listened to the audiobook so much, it's kind of stuck in my head, and that's how I say it. But George says Brienne, which is how I, imagined it at first. It was also,
I think that's how every reasonable person in the world would pronounce it, except for the narrator.
He also says Dothraki.
Really?
Rather than Dothraki. Just about everyone says Dothraki too, including the TV show. So I thought it was interesting that he pronounces it differently than, everyone including the TV show. All right. So, so let's move on to The Walking Dead. So let's see, when we talked back in episode 25, we talked about the first 2 episodes, and I really loved the first episode, and I was sort of so-so on the second episode. I don't know, what did you end up thinking about the season?
Yeah, overall I was left feeling like I should like it more than I do. I think it's pretty good. It diverges a lot from the comics. Like, I don't know. I mean, I kind of actually even wondered like why they adapted The Walking Dead at some point. Like, it's like, well, why actually adapt The Walking Dead if you're going to diverge from it this much? It's like you have a comic book series that's plotted out and mapped out, I don't know, like 13 trade paperback volumes already. Like, so you've got all of the writing done for you already. It's already scripted. Why don't you like try to stay close to that? I mean, and it's already proven good. But I mean, they went off in such wildly different directions than the comic book that I was sort of a little bothered by that. And then just even if I just divorce it from the comic book and just watch it to enjoy it, like I don't know, I didn't like it as much as I was hoping to.
Yeah, I definitely, by the end, I definitely got more and more frustrated by how much it was diverging from the comic books. And I was very sort of lukewarm on it by the end.
Mm-hmm.
I think, as I understand it, what happened was that, typically for a TV show like this, you would have a pilot. And then, if the pilot does well, it goes to series. And then they film the whole rest of the season. And I guess what they decided to do with Walking Dead was, rather than film a pilot, they would sort of film the first season would be kind of like an extended pilot. So they would film 6 episodes. And that would sort of be the pilot. And if that did poorly, they wouldn't make any more. But even if it did poorly, they would have 6 episodes that they could slap onto DVDs and sell. Whereas if you just film 1 episode, there's nothing really you can do with it if it doesn't go to series.
Mm-hmm.
And so they needed some sort of more self-contained story that would fit into that 6-episode arc. And so they came up with the idea, they're like, well, the characters are in Atlanta. They would obviously, one obvious thing that they might think to do is go to the CDC. Which is not, I mean, that's not a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really like the execution of it.
I hated it. I didn't like that at all.
I don't know. So yeah, I loved the first episode. Some of the other, there were like, moments throughout those 6 episodes that I really liked. But, and I still like it. I'll still, tune in for season 2. I listened to actually an interview with the actors, and they're promising that season 2 is going to shock you like nothing that's ever appeared on television before. So I certainly hope that's the case, because I definitely found that the darker the show was, the more I liked it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to stick around for season 2 as well. Again, I think this is a case of really high expectations. So, because I really love the comic book. And yeah, I mean, when they diverged so much, that was disappointing. But then also because I don't feel like it was as good. It's not just that it was different, but that it wasn't good as good either. That was frustrating. So, and especially like you said, that last episode, like, going to the CDC, that's a great idea. But yeah, the execution of that seemed really like I didn't believe it. It didn't feel very authentic to me.
Yeah, no, it totally seems like a Hollywood version of the CDC. I mean, I've never been there, but I can state with a high degree of confidence that it's nothing like that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Have you been following any of the bizarre behind the scenes rumors that have been coming out of Walking Dead?
I've heard, the sort of general stuff, like how Frank Darabont got run out or whatever. But I mean, I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with what actually happened. I mean, I know, like I saw, like I guess at Comic-Con, like nobody was allowed to talk about it, or maybe that was right before it happened. But like at Dragon Con, I know specifically, I saw some blogs saying that the actors were given specific instructions not to talk about Frank Darabont or whatever, or to talk about what happened.
Yeah.
And not only the actors were given instructions, the audience were given, like they did a Q&A. The audience were told, like I believe they said specifically 6 times, don't ask any questions about Frank Darabont. So that's kind of funny. I mean, I don't like what could have possibly happened there that they're so worried about the news getting out. Like, you know what I mean? One of the things that I heard was that they cut the budget for Walking Dead in order to help finance the next season of Mad Men. That was the most troubling rumor I heard. And I don't know how legit that is, but I could see if if Frank Darabont basically just pushed back so much when they were cutting the budget that they fired him. I could see that being what happened, but I mean, I don't think anybody really knows, or whoever knows isn't saying,
Mm-hmm. I mean, even before that, though, there was this rumor that, like, Frank Darabont had fired the entire writing staff and
Oh, yeah, right.
was, like, bringing in all new writers, and people are like, no, that's not true. I mean, I don't know. It sounds like there's just, weird stuff going on behind the scenes, and I don't think we have any hope of knowing, but it does just make you a little nervous that there seems to be so much chaos and uncertainty. Just on the subject of Mad Men, I just want to say really briefly, I mean, it's a bit outside our purview for this episode, but I mean, that's a really good show. And actually what got me to watch it initially was I read an article where they said that lots of science fiction fans like Mad Men because it has some of the same things that appeal to people about dystopian science fiction. It's like looking into this dark future, except it's actually the actual past. So yeah, I just want to say, like, if you haven't watched Mad Men, you should give it a try. I think it's a really, really good show. All right. And speaking of another show that's maybe a bit outside our purview, but we're going to talk about it anyway, because we really like it, is Dexter. This is a show about a serial killer who kills mostly other serial killers and just generally bad people. And I actually watched this. I started watching this show because John recommended it to me. And, he's, because I'd heard the premise. I'm like, I don't want to, I have no interest in, because I have this rule that I don't watch cop, doctor, or lawyer shows because I've just seen too many of them. It's like, I want to see something different. And like like how much more cliche can you get than serial killers, But anyway, John told me to watch it, and so I did, and I love it. It's just this fantastic show. I'll say it's almost like I would almost even say it's almost a fantasy show. Because it's it's this very sort of surreal, it's like a surreal comedy almost, that Dexter, it's very funny the way he has to sort of balance his killing with his family life, and he has these sort of existential angsty conversations with his victims before he kills them and stuff, and
it definitely feels like fantasy, even though it's strictly takes place within the bounds of the universe as we know it. Although curiously, in the books, because this is based on a series of books, in the books it actually does veer into fantasy after a couple books, and I think that might be actually partially to help the author diverge from the series a bit, because the first book basically mirrors the first season mirrors the first book almost exactly. Although it's a rare case of it's a rare case of an adaptation where when they made changes to the TV or film, or in this case TV, when they made changes, they actually improved it every time they made a change. And I mean, the first book is really good, but man, the first season is amazing. But then, the second season diverges from the books completely. It's like at the end of it just picks up where the first season left off, and it doesn't have anything to do with the second book. So then, the authors continue to write books as they continue to make episodes of the season or the series. And so at some point he added actual fantasy elements into it. So I believe Dexter's Dark Passenger actually is revealed to be a demon in the books. I actually... curiously enough, even though I'm a science fiction fantasy person, when I actually got to that in the books, I stopped reading them because it started to feel stupid to me.
No, it's interesting. I actually just listened to an interview with Jeff Lindsay, and who wrote that series, and he said something I thought was really interesting. Speaking of the Dark Passenger, but he said that he's done a lot of research into criminal psychology and stuff, and he was saying that this Dark Passenger in the series, Dexter refers to the sort of aspect of himself that needs to kill people as his Dark Passenger, but that this is a real thing, and that people who have this, can see it in other people. And he says that, if you if you were to like go to a bar on a military base or whatever, that maybe 1 out of 100 people who would show up there have this Dark Passenger, this sort of compulsion. And that, they've, people who have this say that, if they're sitting there in a bar and someone else walks into the bar who has that they like instantly, they know, like, oh, that's another one. That's another person like me. They just recognize there's something where they recognize it in each other. But I think, one thing I was thinking about that makes Dexter sort of relevant for this show is that Dexter is really kind of like a geek hero,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
They just, refer to, he's referred to constantly as a lab geek, and, and he's good at science, and so I think there's a lot in him that sort of geeks can identify with. He's sort of obsessive about what he does, and
Very socially awkward.
Yeah, that he's just different from other people, and he's not moved by the sorts of things that motivate average people, and so he's sort of isolated among crowds. And I think a lot of geeks can sort of, identify with that.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things I find about his character is that, he describes himself as sort of dead inside. Like he has like he doesn't know how, he doesn't understand like emotions or how to react to people or how to deal with people in that way. And so he fakes it, and that's kind of a fascinating idea that there could be like, that you could actually be interacting with people every day who are the same way, that they theoretically they actually don't feel it. They don't actually feel what they're expressing, but they're just faking it because, that's the only way you can actually get by in the world. But I thought that was kind of a genius thing. Sorry, were you going to say something?
Well, I think what's genius is the idea of a sympathetically portrayed sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real, I read this really interesting book called The Sociopath Next Door, where this person was saying it was an incredibly high percentage of the population. I don't remember. It was, I think, somewhere between 1% and 10%, somewhere in there, are sociopaths, which means that they have no emotional connection to other people. Mm-hmm. And that, people who are sociopaths generally, very early in their childhood, they realize that they're just different from other people, and they, realize that they're going to have to fake having emotions, fake having an emotional connection to other people, to just get along in human society. And so they're sort of like high intelligence and low intelligence sociopaths. But high intelligence sociopaths are often extraordinarily charming, and much more charming than ordinary people, because it's something that they've had to study really hard and work at. And so, they're often, and they often are like business executives and things like that, things where you actually, you're actually rewarded for your ability to treat people badly, just to sort of switch off your empathy. There was a book that just came out where it was sort of, I can't think what the title was, but it was exploring, how business executives and things are, that the percentage of sociopaths working in those professions or something, probably 2 or 3 or 4 times the rate of sociopaths among the general population. And the author talks about interviewing this businessman who's a sociopath, and the guy's whole living room is just full of stuffed condors and stuff like that, that he just is obsessed with and idolizes predators. And that's just something that's a very common feature of sociopaths.
Wow.
I do think most people, most people can't relate to killing people or whatever, but I think most people can sort of relate to Dexter's feelings of not fitting in, or,
sure.
feeling like, people around me have no idea what's really going on in my head. And, if they only knew, what would they think? Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty universal.
Oh, yeah. And I think the other part of it that appeals is the, like you were saying, the sort of absurdity of the situation. You have this guy trying to balance his serial killing with his family and all that. And then, and also there's the, the sort of vigilante aspect of it. I think that, there's something that sort of appeals to us on a base level, Mm-hmm. And I think the idea of training a serial killer, identifying a serial killer at a young age and training him to do something good instead of evil is kind of an interesting one.
Does it seem like Dexter has gotten less sociopathic as the series has gone along?
Yeah, I think he's learning how to be a regular person. I think that's part of like his character development, and so I think that makes sense. But yeah, I think that's certainly present, and I think it's intentional. I don't think it's just that they're getting away from his character. I think I think that's intentional to show some character growth. Although it'll be, we haven't seen season 5 yet. So, and I won't say anything. I won't say any spoilers about season 4. But there's something that happens at the end of season 4 that sort of makes you wonder what's Dexter going to be like now, because it's kind of a major event. So, if anything's going to affect him on an emotional level, you would think that would. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in season 5. I've actually heard some bad things about season 5, so I'm kind of dreading it. So I mean, I hope they were misguided, misguided reviews. But I was going to say actually about the comedy, sort of the dark comedy that the show has. I think they kind of did a great job setting that up right from the get go, even just with the title sequence, because like the sort of music that plays is like kind of odd and goofy, and they do this great. The visual aspect of the opening sequence, they have this great sequence where, like they're showing all these average day-to-day things that Dexter does when he wakes up, but then it looks kind of violent, kind of gross, but it turns out like he's like, he's just cutting ham, or he's just shaving his face, or he's just like, squeezing an orange, or whatever. It's like, it's all these things that like actually look kind of gross and horrifying, but then like you see that they're actually just his regular day-to-day tasks. It's very clever and amusing.
I have to believe that was inspired by the opening sequence of the feature film American Psycho, based on the Bret Easton Ellis novel, where you just in the movie you just see sort of red drops falling, and you eventually see that someone's decorating a cake, And I mean, speaking of like, is Dexter fantasy or not? It sort of seems like it's fantasy that this guy is able to get all this stuff done. It's like, he's working a full-time job. He's married. He has some kids that he's taking care of. And he also has time to investigate criminals on the side and kidnap them and murder them.
Right.
In a way that must be, I mean, how long does it take to cover an entire room in saran wrap? All this stuff. And then clean all that up and then go out into the ocean and dump the bodies. I mean, by the time, by the time of season 4, you're like, okay, this is some parallel universe. Like, nobody could actually get all this stuff done, in a typical day,
I mean, unless maybe you had like an out where like, he actually he gets by on like only like 2 hours of sleep or something like that, like maybe he could get all of that done if you sort of factor in something like that. But they don't attempt to explain how he gets all this stuff done. So,
I mean, one thing that I think is really good is that essentially, his job is so technical that you get the feeling that nobody who he works with has any idea how long it takes him, So, I mean, I know a lot of, people often have jobs where, like if you're working computers or something where the people you're working for have no idea how quickly you can actually do the stuff. And so, you actually, you work for like an hour a day and then do your own stuff for 7 hours a day. And the people, who have hired you don't realize that. I actually, Robert Kirkman, actually, who wrote The Walking Dead, I think he said his first job was like that, where, he got most of his early comics done, when he was supposed to be working this job. So maybe Dexter's like that, he's in the office, but, he's not actually doing lab work. He's researching prospective victims or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that there are other people in the forensic department. So, like, I would think, like Vince Masuka or whatever. At least he would know that Dexter was just screwing around in there or whatever. If he was too late on stuff,
And Vince Masuka hardly seems like the kind of guy who would be on people to get their work done. I mean, he's probably surfing porn like 7 hours a day. So.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, it's just when Masuka's surfing for porn, Dexter's like doing his research for his victims. So so they actually get work done about the same rate.
I mean, in recent years, there have been a couple things that have been adapted. TV fantasy and science fiction book series that have been adapted into TV shows. I mean, one would be Dune and Children of Dune. I actually didn't make it very far into that. Did you make it? Did you watch any of that?
No, I mean, I know they were very highly regarded by a lot of people, but I couldn't get into either of them. And I mean, that's a little different too, because those were both miniseries. They weren't actual like supposed to be ongoing TV series, but still, it's worthy of mention. And I assume the other thing you were going to mention is the Earthsea miniseries. Yeah, also terrible. I think universally considered terrible. Even Ursula Le Guin, who wrote the books, has decried it as basically a crime against humanity. So I don't think anyone thinks that was good. Although I admit I didn't get very far into it, and yeah, I know, I'm sorry to the haters who hate when I do that, but I it was so terrible I couldn't watch it. But speaking of Sci-Fi Channel, I mean, they also adapted the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, and Jim Butcher's we just interviewed him. He'll be featured in an upcoming episode. But based on his Harry Dresden novels, and that made a one full season, I believe, and then got canceled. Did you ever see that?
Mm-mm.
I saw it. I thought it was okay. I didn't really take to it. And I mean, I've read a couple of the Dresden Files books, and I mean, I think they're cool, but I didn't think that the adaptation was particularly good. And I mean, I was kind of sad for Jim Butcher because he seemed to be happy with it, and I mean, maybe that was more like he sort of had to say that he liked it, you know what I mean? Because I mean, I guess if you have something being adapted, you're kind of obligated somewhat to support it, But I didn't really get into it though.
One author told me one time that in Hollywood it's actually a serious consideration that they really prefer adapting stuff from authors who are dead. Because that means then the author is not going to trash it, and
right.
Because the adaptations are so often awful, authors end up trashing them, very often. So it's actually a real consideration they have. Like, is this person dead? Oh, good.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm picking up a definite pattern when it comes to fantasy and science fiction TV series that they tend to all be really bad. And that's why, it was announced, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years ago or something, that the Sci-Fi Channel was going to do Roger Zelazny's 9 Princes in Amber as a Sci-Fi Channel miniseries. And I was just like, no, please let that not happen. And fortunately...
Well, luckily it didn't.
Luckily it didn't, yeah. But I mean, like, the Chronicles of Amber is sort of, you can't imagine a series that needs a big budget more than that, I mean, just the idea of trying to do that on a TV budget is just painful to even think about. All right, so I think we're going to wrap things up there. If anyone has any, fantasy and science fiction TV shows adapted from book series that we didn't mention that you want to highlight, post a comment over at IO9. You can go to our website at geeksguideshow.com and find the link for episode 44 with Charlaine Harris. That'll take you over to IO9 and post a comment there. Let us know what you think. And as always, we're sponsored by audible.com. And it would really help us out if people would go to our website again at geeksguideshow.com and click on any of the ads for Audible. That'll take you to a page where you can sign up for a free trial subscription and get one free audiobook. And of course, a free audiobook you might want to get is something by Charlaine Harris, our guest today. Looks like pretty much all of her books are available through audible.com. So, just pick one and check it out.
Another way you can support the show is just by giving us a review or rating over at iTunes. So just go to iTunes and search for the Geek's Guide to the Galaxy podcast and, just give us a review or a rating. We're up to 69 ratings. And, if you help us, we'd like to get to 100 by the year's end. So if you can help us do that, we'd appreciate it.
All right, so that was our show. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of IO9. For this episode's show notes, to subscribe to this podcast, or for more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your hosts, visit johnjosephatadams.com or davidbarkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by Slipgate 9 Entertainment. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.